Alright, so today we're going to be doing Lighting 101 here at the Grand. We're going to run through everything as if we know nothing about lighting and we're running for the first time. So we're going to be going through some technology that is quite outdated but still in use, and nothing wrong with it, it still functions. And then we're going to go all the way up through modern day lighting as well, so you get a brief overview of everything there is to offer. And by the end of this lesson, you will have the basic understanding to be able to put lights up, focus them, connect them to your dimmer board, and then operate them for a show. That's our goal for the end of this video. So we're going to start with one of the old standards of theater, the parcan. The parcan is this instrument right here. This is literally just a can that has a light in it. People have made these before with coffee cans. As long as you put a lens in it, a coffee can with a light bulb is a parcan. It will work. So these are your standard concert lighting. These are just going to throw color straight down that barrel, and it's going to just basically have a tight circle of color that's going to hit the stage floor. Usually this is what we see in modern day DJ rigs as well. When you buy a lot of the pre-made kits, you see a lot of parcans that are hung, and they have color in them because they're quick, they're light, they're easy, and they don't necessarily have to be on a dimmer rack. You can put them on a household dimmer or just put them in the wall, because you can put these on a standard outlet without any problems. So one of the neat things with a parcan that makes it versatile is actually the lens. So this here is a parcan that's sitting on a floor mount. It's just a plywood base that we have. We use these as shin busters or floor lights, just so we can either aim light up or shoot straight across the stage. This is if we're going to hang it on a pipe, like you would see for most concert settings. This is what actually makes the instrument work. The lamp here is a halogen, and you'll see that there's all these grid lines that are in this glass here. And there are three different settings. There is a narrow, a medium, and a wide. And depending on which one you want, if you want a narrow throw, so it's going to be a narrower beam, or if you want a wider beam, you're going to change out not the instrument, but the lamp. So all you have to do to change functions on this instrument is to change the lamp inside. These lamps, if you look at the grooves, they do run right now horizontally. I can put this in the instrument vertically. So if I want the light to spread more up to down rather than left to right, I just rotate this in the instrument. That's how you focus a parcan. Yes, you can actually focus a parcan. So this is a very versatile and very cheap instrument. You can actually buy these. This one here was $50 a piece, which in the lighting world is really cheap, but these things are a workhorse. You can put them through a lot of different events without any issues. They're easy to work on and maintain, and these lamps here are fairly easy to obtain and pretty affordable as well. So that's kind of your standard lighting if you just need to throw color down, if you're just going to be washing certain areas with different colors. This is one of your best bets to go. It's a little bit more focused than a Fresnel. A Fresnel is these ones right back here. This is a standard light that you'll see in almost every theater, young and old. It's actually spelled Fresnel, but it's pronounced Fresnel. This is a 6-inch Fresnel, and by that it means that the diameter of this light here is 6 inches. Now, if you look at the lens, you'll see that there's these concentric rings on the lens. This is what makes it a Fresnel. Okay? This was a lens that was invented, and it was used most commonly, believe it or not, in lighthouses. It is the shape of the glass that is going to focus the light into a single spot. For lighthouses, that gives you a much bigger throw. It condenses the light before shooting it out, and it's all done through the glass of the lens itself rather than any function of the instrument itself. Now, with the Fresnels, you can focus them in two different ways that we call a flood or a spot. And there's a little button down here on the bottom. If I undo that, then I can move the lamp inside. What's going to happen is, if this is my lens here in the front and this is inside, I have my lamp right here. In order to change it to a spot, I can move the lamp further back, and that is moving the light itself further away from the lens and it's going to make your beam spread wider when it goes through the lens. If I want more of a flood to just get a soft, big wash of color on the stage, I just slide that lamp forward so it's closer to the lens, and then the light is going to go as wide as it possibly can when it comes out. So it's that focal length inside the instrument that's going to make a difference as far as whether you have a spot or a flood. So you can focus a Fresnel that way. These are best used for downlights for color or side lights for color. Basically, you can use them for white as well if you're just trying to light up an entire area. It's not something you use for a tight focus, but if you need to wash an area with color or with light, this is one of the best instruments to do that with. So after the Fresnel, we have this instrument here. This is basically a Lico. Lico is a company, but it became kind of a standardized nomenclature. It is a 6x6, this one. And that is from here to here, it is 6 inches deep. This is where the second lamp is, or the second lens. The length of the barrel times the diameter. So when we say 6x6, that means that once again, like the Fresnel, it's the diameter we're measuring, and then we're measuring the length of the barrel. So with these instruments, you would, in order to change the focus into a tighter beam, you want a longer barrel. And what that's going to do is, if you get a 6x9 or a 6x12, it's going to make it a more tighter focus, maybe not brighter unless you put a brighter lamp in it. But it's going to basically control the size of the light that's coming out as far as where it's going to hit on the floor or on the actor's face. This is pretty much your standard, most common area lighting instrument that was in use primarily from the 50s, and there are still schools today that use these. I grew up using the 6x9s as our standard before we were able to get some ellipsoidals. These are wonderful instruments, but as you can tell with this one, well past its prime. This one we don't use anymore, still has the old asbestos wiring on it. But it's a great showpiece to see where we've come from. But these instruments, there's nothing wrong with them in general. The principle still works. And if you're in a small venue like a church or a Grange Hall, these are perfect instruments to use. Very easy to manipulate as well. You can't change the size of the light so much. You can focus them as far as making it so that the ring that hits the floor and light around the outside edge, if that's going to be sharp or soft. If it's soft, it's going to be a little bit bigger, not much. So you have a little bit of leeway with these. So you'll hear people call these Licos, even if it wasn't made by Lico, it's because that's what they're familiar with. There's a company that came out with these, mostly produced by Strand Lighting, is what a lot of people will be familiar with. So these good old workhorse, we've come a long way. Now jumping to the future, quite a ways, we have intelligent lighting. So for intelligent lighting, we have here, this is an Intimidator spot made by Chauvet. Chauvet is a company that started out making a lot of DJ equipment. They have been getting better and better at making instruments as they started producing more for mega churches and other venues like that. So these are a cheaper way to go, very affordable, but they're a little bit limited in their capacity. This instrument here, I can control from the light board. This does not go into the dimmer rack. This is controlled directly from the light board. With this, I can basically sit at the board and control where it's going to aim on the floor. I can change the color coming out of here, and I can also have a Gobo, which we'll talk about Gobos in a moment, in here showing a pattern that's on the floor or the wall. The problem with this one is, being the smaller and cheaper model that it is, I can't change colors to anything I want. There are preset colors in here. They're little plastic kind of slides that slide in front of the light, so you're going to get the lighting primary colors. You're going to get amber, red, green, and blue. Those will be the colors that you get out of here, and there's no mixing to try and get colors in between. It just slides one to the other. So you're very limited in what you can do with this. But if you don't want to hang a bunch of specials, a light that's dedicated for one moment, one spot in the show, and you need to be able to do a bunch of those at different points, this is a good option because this will allow you to move the light in the middle of a show to get ready for the next scene to pop up in an odd spot that's not covered by your normal stage lighting. So these, as cheap as they are, do have their advantages. These are great to have on hand. We don't all have the luxury of doing that. Now, if we were having a bigger show, we wanted a bigger professional model that could do absolute color wash and do all kind of the Gobos we want to do, you're talking $2,000 to $5,000 just to buy one if they're used. So you got to kind of look at your budget, see what you can afford. It's nice to have these, but it's not a show killer if you don't have one. You just got to get creative with your lighting design. These here are controlled not with our standard cables, but with DMX control. DMX control is something that we also use to control our specialists. So our fog machines, strobe lights, things like that, they're all going to be controlled from that. This is relatively new technology here. Going a step back, before we get into LED, which is what this is, we have cyc lights. Now, cyc lights have one purpose, and that is to throw color onto the back wall or your cyclorama. The cyclorama can be hard. It could be a solid wall like we have here at the Grand, or it could be a white piece of fabric that's a soft scrim, a soft cyc. Generally, if you have a cyc lights, you can have multiple colors throughout the show that are giving different colored backgrounds to whatever you're doing for the show. They come in long strips, but I have a short. You've probably all seen these. These are your standard work light. These are halogens. Essentially, we have a metal tray inside with a halogen light in the middle. A cyc light is nothing more than a series of these lined up in a row in a single box unit. And then you can put different gel colors on these to change their different colors. That's all a cyc light is. It's the same technology, and sometimes they even use the same lamps. So it's nothing more complicated than that. It just throws a lot of light onto the cyc where you can change color without washing the rest of the stage. That's the purpose of a cyc light. Now, I mentioned a couple of things before. We talked about being able to change the color on instruments. And you saw me take this out of Fresnel. So this is actually two different things. This is what we call a gel frame. However, if you're trying to buy these, what you have to actually look up is a color frame. They don't call them gel frames when you're looking for them to buy, so you're looking for color frames. This is for a 6-inch Fresnel. You can get 8-inch Fresnels. Then some of our other lights have much smaller ones. So you got to know the instrument you're buying it for. Usually when you buy a light, they come with their own gel frame, but over time, as you can see, they kind of get a little used and abused. They can start to fall apart. They are dealing with a lot of heat. So over time, you have to replace these. So just remember, if you're looking for these, they're called color frames. Now talking about the color, these are the gels. This is basically a piece of cellophane that has different color on it. And this, we can choose any color. There are a couple different manufacturers. The most common is Roscoe. Another one is Lee, and then there's Gamma. Those are the three big ones that people are familiar with. You can order these. They have little palette swatch books. You can get a whole variety of different colors. This one here is a very dark blue. Keep in mind when you are designing lights and you're looking at different colors that lighting primary colors to mix and match is not the same as an artist colors, right? So the primary colors that we use in the art world is your yellow, red, and blue. We can make all colors out of those. With lighting, that is not the case. With lighting, it is red, blue, and green. So those three colors in lighting are the three primary colors. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your gel colors. This I use as a very nice down blue lighting. Gives me some nice nighttime scenes. The reason we call these gels is because these used to be made out of gelatin. No kidding. So they would be a gelatin that was made very hard, very solid, but they could mix the colors any way they wanted. And a lot of times they had to mix them at the theater where they were in the air. That technology is way behind us. We're a lot more advanced now. We don't need to worry about that. You can buy these in sheets, the colors that you want. You cut them out with scissors or a razor blade, stick them in your gel frame, and you're good to go. So we have gels, we have color frames, and then I mentioned something before that's a Gobo. So Gobos are a little bit different. They are independent. This is a Gobo frame or a Gobo holder. This is the Gobo itself. And there's going to be different sizes. There's an A and a B. Basically, one's larger than the other, depending on what instrument you're going to put it in. So make sure you know the instrument that you're going to be using, and you can look it up to see whether you need an A or a B. The two most common lights are Shakespeare's and ETC. The ETC makes a source 4, and then the Shakespeare's have their instruments, and one uses an A, one uses a B. So it's a matter of knowing which ones you need for that light. So we just sandwich this Gobo in here. Gobo is basically a metal plate with holes punched out of it that's going to let light through so we can throw a pattern on the back wall. I'm going to show you that in a moment. We're going to talk about the last light that I have today, and that is the most common one. This is the instrument that we use for all of our area lighting, for any specials. It is the workhorse of theater. This one happens to be a Shakespeare. We do have the ETC source 4s here as well. We're going to show you the Shakespeare because that's what we have access to. So our next instrument is what we call the ellipsoidal. The ellipsoidal actually has two lenses inside. It has one at the front of the barrel and one back here, and then your lamp is back here. So you're going to use the two lenses. One's concave, one's convex, and by squeezing them together and pulling them apart with the length of the barrel, you're going to be able to expand and shrink the size of your spot that's hitting the floor, as well as your focus. So it's a very versatile instrument. The other thing that ellipsoidals have is they have shutters. So you see these tabs that are here. I can manipulate these in order to make cuts on the sides of the light so I can make things square and all that. So it allows me to shape the light so it's not just a circle hitting the floor. I can control exactly where it ends and where it starts. And we'll demonstrate that as well in a moment. On these, the focus knob is right around here on the back side. I've got my hand back here. I'm just going to keep my hand down here where the gel frame goes. Loosen that up, and you see I can raise and lower that. It doesn't go very far, and it doesn't have to, right? So when I get to where I want, I'm just going to tighten this focus knob on the bottom right down, and it's going to stay. These instruments are extremely versatile. Not only do we use them for specials and for area lighting, but we can use them for effects as well, such as the Gobos that I talked about. So with the Gobos, we have our Gobo in its frame here. You'll see that here where my shutters are, on the front, which is the top of the instrument, there's an extra wide slot right in front of the shutter, and that's where this is going to slide in. It's going to go down between your, it's going to be between your shutter and your frontmost lens. All right, it's not going to be behind the shutter. If you're behind the shutter, you put it in the wrong spot. I won't say it's impossible because I've seen people do it, but when you look at it, you'll see there's an extra wide slot that just slides right in front. Now remember, with these, it works just like the human eye. So we're putting an image in, and the two lenses are going to flip the image, just like our eye does, because it's an ellipsoidal. So you have to make sure that you put these Gobos in upside down from what you want it to look like on your wall or on your floor, if that matters for the effect that you're doing. You can use Gobos to create a light breakup pattern that's just aimed at the floor. People walk through it and it looks like moonlight or something coming through the trees. That's a really fun effect. But a lot of times they're really designed for putting an image onto a back wall or onto a scene piece. So those are different ways that we can use those. The one other thing I'll talk about with the ellipsoidals, and this is true for the Shakespeares and the ETC source 4s, is that the way we classify these ones, like the 6x9, 6x12 shows a different size and that we can get out of the barrels, these are done by degree. And the reason they do that is because we're basically calculating the degrees of your cone of light coming out of the instrument. The greater the degrees, the wider the cone of spread. The smaller the degrees, the more narrow it is. This one here is a 50-degree instrument from Shakespeare. The 50 degree is going to be one of our bigger throws that we have wide, which means I can put this light closer to the object that I want to light up with the Gobo and be able to focus it. If I want to have a light that's further away that's being used for that, I need something with a narrower beam. So a lot of times for my upstage areas, when we get towards the back wall of the stage, if the light positions I have are mid to downstage, I'm going to use a 26 degree instrument from Shakespeare, sorry, not from Shakespeare, but ETC Source 4s. Shakespeare's have different degree numbers. It's an easy way to keep them separate from the ETC. ETC has a standard of a 36 degree, which is your basic area light. It's going to be a really good average size cone spread for you. And then a 26 degree. So those are pretty decent. If you're trying to light something from the back of the house, from all the way in the back, like in your projection booth or from your tech booth, a lot of times those are 10 degree barrels, which actually look like huge cones, almost like a satellite dish with a gel on the front. So the barrels change. You can use the same instrument and just change the barrel to get different degrees out of that. It's one way to save money if you need to go that way. So now I'm going to show you how we do shutters and how we do the Gobos. Alright, so now we're going to talk about our Gobos and how we handle those. So I showed you how we put the Gobos in. Right now my barrel is all the way in. It is unfocused. I'm going to undo my focus knob down on the bottom. And then I'm going to slide my barrel out. And you see it focusing on the wall. And you're going to try and get your edges as sharp as you possibly can. Now you'll see right there, I'm really sharp, but around the edges I'm starting to get a little bit of light bleed. So you don't want to go much further than that. Right about there is just about perfect for what we're looking at. It's going to change a little bit. If you look at the top one looks really sharp and really great. When we get out to the left-hand side one, it's a little bit fuzzier, and that's because it's at a bit of an angle from the surface it's projecting onto. That's going to be normal, so it's a matter of knowing where you want the focus to be. So that is our snowflake gobo that we use. Yay, Christmas events. We always use them. Pretty basic, pretty standard. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the gobo out. And we're going to talk about shutters. Now, the shutters, as I said before, are these knobs that are on the sides of the lights. And when you look at the area on the back wall that we're going to be aiming at, these are going to be straight lines. So, by pushing this instrument in on the right-hand side of the instrument, the left-hand side of your light is going to be cut in. Because remember, just like the gobo, everything is backwards, it's opposite. So now I've brought that one in there. I'm going to switch to the bottom shutter, which is going to bring my top in. Bring that in. Now if I go to my left side, I'm going to bring the right side of the light in. There we go. And then the top shutter is going to do my bottom. Now I have a clearly defined square, which is really great with lighting design. If you're doing like a hallway or something like that, you want a very defined area, this is a great way to go. With these, they don't have to be straight lines either. I can put these in to any kind of shape that I want. So I can make this fit to any space and any need that I have. So that is the basics of how to use the instruments themselves in the air. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about how we actually plug these in to get power. Now we're going to talk about cables, and this is what's going to provide our power and our communications for the lights. We've now hung the lights on the pipe. We have to make them work. So we're going to start with the standard that we are currently using today, and that is what we call stage pin or 3-pin. So these connectors here, you'll see that they have 3 pins. One's hot, one's cold, and one is ground. These are very versatile, very universal, easy to use. Pretty much all your standard stage lighting today is going to be using stage pin. They don't all have to, but this is pretty much the industry standard. If you order a light and it's brand new, they're going to ask you what you want for a pin connector. And the reason why is some theaters that are older might have different connections than the stage pin. And that's totally fine. They can put whatever you'd like on there. So just be aware of that. When you order a light, it doesn't automatically come with a stage pin. You got to tell it what you want. But most theaters, we're going to use these stage pins. All they do is they just plug straight in. I got a female connector here and a male connector. don't think I need to describe why they're called that. They just plug in together like that. Now, I will say, if you're going to be cabling these up in the air, and if they're going to be hanging vertical at all, it is wise to take a piece of gaff tape and over the seam where they connect, just put a piece of tape around it. It just gives a little bit of strength so that they don't fall out, because they are straight pins. They can conceivably do that. So just be aware of that. That's your standard stage pin connector. The older one that a lot of theaters still have, most people have phased out of them, is the good old twist lock. And that's these. And they look very similar to what you use for your washer or your dryer or your appliances at home. It's essentially the same thing. It's just going to change the size of this depending on the voltage going through. A lot of your dishwashers appliances are 230. These are 120. So, and that's for meters. With these twist locks, you have these 3 prongs here. One of them has a right angle piece on it, and that is so that these can only go in one way to the female head. So you put it in, and then you're going to twist it, and once you've twisted it together, you cannot pull these apart. That's why it's called a twist lock. And that's why with these, you don't need to put a piece of gaff tape around the outside, because that twist is going to keep it tight. However, if you have an old one that sometimes if the cables are twisted, the cables want to start to relax, go ahead and put a piece of tape around that. It'll just prevent the cables from twisting it on you. But twist lock is one of the oldest standards. Many places getting away from it. A lot of times you have adapters. So if you're going to a new place, make sure you have one that goes female twist lock or male twist lock to the pin connector, so you can adapt to any theater that you're going to. The stage pin and your twist lock are the 2 most versatile and the 2 most common connectors you're going to find in all of your stage lighting. And what we have is our good old household Edison, right? So it's your basic ground plug, hot and cold, home wires. We call them Edison. So if someone says, hey, I need an Edison plug for this, this is what they're talking about, just your standard electrical cord. Just watch the gauge on the cords that you use. Make sure that if you're putting a large light like the Arcan that we had earlier, I'm going to want a thicker gauge on this so that it can handle more load. You don't want to put it on just a simple one that you would use for your vacuum cleaner. So just make sure the cable can handle the load. But these Edison connectors are completely valid as well. A lot of the modern technology that we have, the intelligent lights and all that, use Edison. They don't use twist, they don't use stage pin, because they're all LED. They don't need the wattage and the voltage that the older instruments do that are sucking all that power for the halogen lamps that they use. So Edison is coming back into style in theaters, so you're going to see this a lot more. So when we say Edison, that's what we're talking about, just your standard home electrical. Another connection that is now becoming more popular, you're going to see more of, is the PowerCon. These look like your speak-on connections that you use for your Nutrix, for your sound system. Essentially they are, but they're a little bit different inside. So we can use these for power. These are great if you're putting practicals on a set. By practicals, I'm talking about floor lamps or a wall sconce, lighting that is meant to be seen on the stage as a source of light. With these, you can just plug it in, twist, and it locks in, you're good to go. So you can move the set all over the place and then just plug this in. There's no pins for you to break off. There's nothing inside there that you're going to snap. So these are extremely durable, great way to go. This adapter here was made to be able to plug our practicals directly into our dimmer rack for our stage lighting. So you can control that lighting from your dimmer rack, from your light board, just like everything else. Now, the last thing to talk about as far as your power goes and communication, we talked about the intelligent light. Now, the intelligent light actually needs 2 cables, and that is, you have one that is going to be your power supply, and that is your standard household Edison. Many of them come with PowerCon connections rather than a Edison. The PowerCon goes into the back, and then on the other end you'll have a male Edison plug to plug in for your power source. All that's doing is providing power. That's not going to tell the light to turn on, off, or do anything like that. Remember, it's an intelligent light. It has a computer on board that is controlled, that's going to tell the light what it needs to do. How do we talk to that computer? Through DMX. So this is a DMX cable here. This one is 3-pin. 3-pin looks exactly and functions the same as an XLR. Okay. With this is a 3-pin. Almost all of your DJ equipment is going to be 3-pin. There is another one, which we have here. This one here is a 5-pin. Now, 5-pin is what we usually use to communicate from the dimmer rack to the light board. So that's pretty much what you're going to be using 5-pin for, but when it comes to your intelligent lighting, that's all going to be run off 3-pin. You can easily find adapters that go from 5-pin to 3-pin and back. You don't get enough signal loss to make a difference. It's a way for you to be able to plug intelligent lights directly into your light board without even having to go through the dimmer rack if you don't want to. You can go directly to your board and run a second universal DMX. So your DMX, this is your communication. This is what is going to allow the computer on board to know what you're telling it to do. The PowerCon and Edison is going to supply the power to that light. All the other lights that we have here, you have just a power. You don't have to worry about communication because whether or not that instrument is getting power is the job of the dimmer racks. And let's go there. All right, so now we're going to talk about the dimmer rack. So we've got the lights hung. We have now run a cable to the lights. Now we need to supply the power to the light to tell it to turn on and off. That's what the dimmer rack does. The dimmer rack is going to take all of the signal that you're getting from the light board, telling it which dimmers to turn on and how much to do. And so it's usually done by percentage, which we'll see at the light board. So this here is basically a power and computing unit. It is going to take signal from the board, which is coming in the DMX we talked about, the 5-pin. This here is coming from the light board, and it's going in here. I have another dimmer rack down below this, so in order to link that in to talk with the board, I have a cable coming out from here, and it's going to run down and go to the input on the next dimmer rack down. I have another dimmer rack backstage further upstairs, so I have another DMX cable coming out of that bottom dimmer rack and going up to that dimmer rack. So everything is linked as a daisy chain, one to the other. That allows the board to talk to these units to tell it what to do as far as how much power to give to what dimmer. This top unit here has 12 dimmers on it. Each dimmer has 2 inputs, or I should say 2 outputs. So what we can do is we can take 2 different lighting cables and put them into the back of this unit. So I can control 2 different lights, or if I use a twofer, which is basically a cable that splits into a Y, I can have 2 instruments coming in on one cable, and I could have 2 more instruments coming in on another cable. Always make sure that you are matching your wattage to what the dimmer is outputting. These are 2.4K dimmers. That means that each channel on this, each dimmer, is putting out 2.4K kilowatts. So with these, you want to make sure that your wattage is going to be around 2,000 and not exceed that. You don't want to put more wattage that the lights are trying to draw than what this can provide. That's how you burn out your dimmers. You can do less. So I can have a single 500 watt instrument on one dimmer without any issue. But I can't have enough so that it adds up to more than 2,000 watts. I can go up to 2.4, but 2,000 is a safe bet to make sure I'm never going to go over that threshold. So always know how many instruments you're plugging in to each dimmer to be able to control them. Keeping that in mind, if you've got multiple lights going into one dimmer, that dimmer is going to come on and all of those lights are going to come on at the same percentage. You can't control each light individually on that one dimmer. So if you want to control lights individually, you spread them out so that they're on different dimmers. So the dimmer is taking signal from the board. It's telling it how much power to supply to the outputs, and then the power goes from the output to those instruments, which then turns those instruments on. That's simple. So it's basically supplying power, and it's also the computer brain that's telling it what it needs.